welcome to African Drums. I'm your host, Elsie Harry, and it's so good to be back on the program. This week, Coffee 250 received a really wonderful gift from Mr. Reginald Sandyford, and this is what you're seeing right here next to me. It is a wooden flag holder, and there's Guyana on it over here, among other things, including a drum. So pretty cool that it has a drum on it because this is African Drums. So I just wanted to show you this and to say thank you to Mr. Reginald Sandyford. We really appreciate this wonderful gift. The theme for this evening's program is violence against women in Plural Guyana. Over the years, we have witnessed in Guyanese society and around the world heinous acts of violence committed against our women. We are in the 4th month of the year, and 2 fatalities from domestic violence have already been reported. Both victims were women. This evening, African Drums takes the time to examine this topic, violence against women in Plural Guyana. Panelists will discuss, among other things, the conditions that lead to violence against women, services available for both the aggressor and the victim, and the ethnic context of violence perpetrated against women. I have with me a dynamic and experienced panel, all of whom you should be familiar with. Ms. Nicole Cole is a professional clinical social worker and commissioner on the Rights of the Child Commission and the Women and Gender Equality Commission. Ms. Natasha Smith is a journalist. Ms. Sherlina Nageer is a public health professional and activist, and Dr. Nq-a-qui is a founding member of the Coffee 250 committee. Sisters, brother, welcome to African Drums.
Thank you very much for having us, and I'm heartened to be here, even though the topic that we're discussing is a very sensitive one.
Definitely. So I want to begin the discussion by asking, what exactly is violence against women, and how does it manifest itself?
Anyone can
Go ahead. You go ahead. Start.
Sherlina?
Doc has actually yielded the floor to you, Nicole, so I'll begin with you.
According to a definition that I'll look at from the British Strategic Plan, which looks at the UK National Plan of Action for Women, Peace and Security that was recently launched. It actually describes violence against women as being, it starts with gender-based violence as an umbrella term for any harmful act that is perpetrated against a person's will, and that is based on socially ascribed gender differences between males and females. Then it goes on to say violence against women and girls is any act of gender-based violence that results in or is likely to result in physical, sexual, or psychological harm or suffering to women, including threats of such acts, coercion, or arbitrary deprivation of liberty, whether occurring in public or private life. Intimate partner violence includes physical, sexual, and emotional abuse and controlling behaviors by an intimate partner. That is taken from the strategic outcome number 3, page 12 of the UK National Plan of Action for Women, which goes from 2018 to 2022. This plan was actually launched by the UK High Commissioner at his residence on the 7th of March 2018. It's a 32-page document, and he has since been advocating for Guyana to actually adopt the plan. I'm also hopeful that he will also put some pounds towards it, because the scourge which we are fighting will call for money. And just to quote the Honorable Justice George, who is now our Chief Justice, when she advocated in 2012 that perhaps the fight to end violence against women needs to piggyback on the HIV fight, whereby every aspect of it is funded. And she said there's even a business coalition on HIV, and this is where she advocated for a business coalition on ending violence against women, and I concur with her.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone have anything to add on the definition, or would like to say how violence against women manifests itself?
Well, I'd like to add a little bit to that. And to broaden that definition a little bit, what Nicole spoke about there primarily was the physical aspect of it, of violence against women, but there's an economic violence against women also. For example, women are expected to do the same work as men, but they get paid, half as much or much less. There's also political violence against women, where women have, in recent history, not been allowed to vote, not been allowed to participate in the process. There is also religious violence against women, because women, for example, in the church still can't be, for example, ministers in some ordinations, and they can't have a female pope, for example. So the context is much broader than just physical, and I hope we'll get to all of these aspects of it as the night progresses.
Definitely.
Yeah.
No, I definitely agree with all of that. I mean, the way I see violence against women in particular, but not just women, is a systemic. There are all these systemic factors, some of which have been mentioned. So, again, most people will think of something they can see visibly, like a punch or something physical, but the emotional aspect, and Nicole touched on some of the intimidation, the self-esteem issues, as well as the economic and state violence are very, very, very important. So we need to look at this issue holistically. There are many factors that contribute, and so for us to think about interventions, we can't just have one way of intervening. There are multiple different avenues that we need to be working on.
Okay, Natasha.
I concur.
Nicole, can you provide for me the number of cases of violence against women which were reported last year and possibly also in 2016?
Certainly. With me, I have a document that was given to me by the police. I did this research for a presentation that I did at within the 16 days of observing ending violence against women, which had the theme Leave No One Behind, End Violence Against Women and Girls. This is the 25th of November 2017, and I presented these stats at the Institute of Gender Studies program on the 29th of November 2017. So in A Division for 2016, they would have had 383 reports, and in 2017 they've had 306. They've placed 186 persons in 2016 before the courts, and in 2017 they placed 167. For the B Division, they would have had 422 reports. This is in 2016. And then they've had 482 in 2017. These are reports, and they've placed persons charged. In 2016 was 291, and in 2017 we've had 261. This is in the B Division. In C, in 2016 you've had 545 number of reports, and in 2017 you've had 457. They placed persons charged 279 in 2016. 206 in 2017. For D Division, you've had 304 in 2016. In 2017, 298. These are a number of reports. In 2016, persons charged, you had 192. For 2017, persons charged, you had 135. This is D. In E Division, they've had 117 reports in 2016, 75 in 2017. In 2016, persons charged were 67, and in 2016, persons charged were 67. In 2017, persons charged were 54. And in F Division, they've had 17 reports in 2016, 60 in 2017. 9 persons they placed in front of the courts or charged them in 2016, 33 in 2017. And in G Division, this is the final division, they've had 304 number of reports in 2016. 109 in 2017, and 2016 persons charged were 80. In 2017, persons charged were 128. In total for 2016, when you add up all the divisions A to G, you've had 2,092 in 2016. This is number of reports. And in 2017, you've had 1,812. Persons charged in 2016 were 1,054, and persons charged in 2017 were 984. Now, these aren't the stats that take in the entire. You still will have numbers added as to it, because remember they gave me this in November, and you would have had incidences that would have occurred after then. I had a number of reports, but it paints a picture and tell you roughly what happened. They also have a 2015 that they amalgamated. The number of reports in 2015, they've had 1,983, and they would have had 1,319 cases. So this gives you somewhat of what they have recorded as reports. Remember, it's still a gray area. There are incidences of violence occurring against women whereby it's never reported and it's hushed, especially when it occurs in certain circles.
Right. That's what I was going to say.
Oh yes, in certain circles, like the woman who got shot to her mouth, and then you hear it was an accidental shooting. You remember that story?
Yes.
In her mouth she shot, and then you heard that it was an accident in her mouth. I think that happened up on the west side.
Yes, but also, I mean, I would say that the numbers that you shared with us, that's really just the tip of the iceberg.
Oh yes.
You know, because I would say for every instance that we hear about, either in the media or that's reported to the police, there are dozens more that never get reported for that date or for that one instance. So
it's a great area of crime.
Tip of the iceberg as far as, you know, anybody who's collected data would tell you.
Oh yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm gonna begin with Natasha with this question. What are some of the conditions that you think lead to violence against women?
Socioeconomic aspects. You know, a woman can be a victim not only by her partner, but by her place of work, as the doctor rightly said earlier, and a series of other factors. It can her dependency on the persons who are violent towards her, that as well. Why does she need this? Why can't she get out of it? Why can't she break free of this bondage? Because it's basically a bondage. And, different factors contribute to that.
Yeah, I would say patriarchy is the number one and the main factor that results in violence against women. And patriarchy is really a system of organizing society where there are unequal gender relations between males and females. So it's a way that puts men as having more power, more influence, more control than women. And this is something that has been around for a while, and it's very ingrained, and we don't even really think about it, but it gets replicated almost as soon as a child is born. So, and women also participate in patriarchy. So things like how we raise children, for example. This is how we get our understanding of how to treat people, respect the fact that, you know, everybody has equal rights and we should be treating men and women equally, the way we communicate, the way we deal with our emotions, right? Those are those are fundamental. The way the system, the economics, you know, how much money we make for different tasks. So we cannot really talk about violence as an end result without looking at the foundational things that contribute to us being where we are. So patriarchy and notions about femininity and masculinity that are very toxic. And it's not just an issue in Guyana, it's a worldwide problem as far as I'm concerned.
I think patriarchy is really an international problem. I say it is a problem because it goes, and I was reading an article recently about the historical perspectives, and I think in order to understand what violence against women really is, one would have to look at the history, and you will find a couple of things. That patriarchy is more than it's a system that it invades every aspect of culture, but it also provides the rationale for inferiority and for violence against women. And as we'll talk more about this in the program, because we'll talk about it in terms of culture, but its foundation is so deeply rooted in things that we cherish, that we don't want to look at the fundamental root cause of violence against women. Because we'll start to look at religion, we'll start to look at, we never were, in the initial stages of history, a patriarchal society. We were a matriarchal society. And with the change to a patriarchal society and the rise of militancy, right, then the whole society almost adopted violence as the standard mode of control, and put laws in place. But more fundamentally, the moral basis for these laws was religion. And the religions themselves continued and perpetrated violence in most fundamental ways. And we'll talk about this during the program as we go. Because going for all the way from God made man, and then made Adam, and then Adam, out of the rib of Adam was Cain, Eve, and then Eve just caused problems because she gave. Well, let me she then created. She gave Adam this fruit to eat, and out of this came original sin. Therefore, women became evil, and then therefore they had to be controlled, and so forth and so on. But we'll talk about this in terms of the cultural aspect of it and the foundation, because it's important to understand the roots of things, because unless you do, you'll be treating just the sore, you'll be treating the skin, surface condition, you will never be getting to the fundamentals. And I think that's where we need to go, because unless we understand the root causes of these things, we will always be looking at a slap, we will be always looking at a punch, we will always be looking at a beating. And that is just the manifestation of it. The root is much deeper. So,
or the shooting. But when you talk about Eve in the Garden of Eden and giving Adam this apple, the question beckons, didn't Adam have a mind of his own to say that I don't want this apple?
We'll come to that. We'll come back to that.
It's a fundamental question that I often ask, because
we'll come back to that.
Being able to influence him, like if he doesn't have a rational mind.
We'll come back to
his
that.
own.
We get further down in the discussion under the religious context. Okay, but I want to know, what are the age ranges of the men who perpetrate violence against women, as well as what are the ages that women begin to experience violence themselves?
The age can range from very young. We've had some horrible reports of 14-year-old. I remember this 14-year-old who got killed by her stepfather a couple of years ago. In 2015, there's a young lady that I once counseled. She was just 18 when she got bludgeoned to death on a ground in Sophia at a dance. Her perpetrator, she was 18, he was 19. If we look recently at the case out of Charity in Essequibo, the young lady who has been burnt, scarred, and is in the USA receiving treatment for some of those burns. She was just 17. So that gives you an idea of how it can be. And then you may see cases in the courts whereby you have a pensioner who's charged with abusing his wife. So you have it across the spectrum in the ages.
I mean, I would go very much younger than that. I think children who witness violence in the home, they are victims as well. So, that's one thing that we hear a lot, why women stay with abusive partners, because they want to provide some stability for their children, and they feel like, a two-parent home is better than a one-parent home. But when there's violence in that home and there are children there and they're witnessing that, they are affected. And there has been a wide body of scientific research that has shown that witnessing violence, experiencing violence changes how your brain actually is shaped and how it forms, and it affects you later on in life. How well you do in school, it affects your health as an adult in terms of heart disease, stress, high blood pressure, mental health, so just even witnessing violence or being in violent situations for a long period of time affects you. So children, and I really think that we need to focus again broadly and look at everybody who's affected. It's not just the woman who might be getting slapped or hit or chopped or whatever. It's everybody who's around and witnessing that as well.
I think part of the solution to this problem should do with some amount of research into the perpetrators of violence against women, and that could go a long way in finding a solution.
But as you talk about children, right away I'm zeroing on corporal punishment. How
Yes.
we actually,
Yes.
that is violence used on children. The corporal punishment issue right there and then, to which Guyana has a huge problem in trying to get eliminated, because parents themselves want teachers to actually inflict that violence as a way of control again, and also as a form of discipline. But when we look at violence and we want to know the age, right away I go right back to a case out of Haslington in 2013. This was a 2-year-old, and we look at this is Sexual Violence Awareness Month, and this 2-year-old, she was left in the care of her uncle and sodomized and subsequently died as a result of her injuries. She never got justice for what has happened to her, and as much as I've advocated for her case to reopen, I'm told it's a technicality in law that if a case is dismissed, it can no longer return to the system. Discharged is different. If it is discharged, it can return, like the case of the young girl out of Mocha, the 8-year-old, who also died as a result of sexual violence. But in the case of little Kimani Phillips out of the Haslington area, just 2, I'm told that her case can never, and her spirit continues to seek some kind of resolution here, because she's the youngest to have died in our society in recent times, so violently.
That is kind of a complicated case as well, because it's family, it's the same family, and how do we deal with that? How would the family members?
It has ripped that family apart.
One of the sexual violence against family members, only in 1970, and it was that actually discussed in a court in the United States now, where there was actually a case that brought a judgment against a family member who raped his wife. And that was the only time that has come up. But what all of this is underlying is that sexual violence is part of against women is part of the culture, right? And depending on where you are in the culture, in some cases it's actually accepted, right? And not criticized. In other cases, it's not. So each segment of the culture that you live in has a set of norms, and those are founded on some principles, right? Those oftentimes are religious principles. And in a lot of instances, as I said, we have not examined the impact of the sanctioning by religions of violence, because that oftentimes, that was the means of control. That was the means of control of not only the family, but control of society, right? Violence. So if a man is violent in the context of his job, he's going to come home, he's going to be violent. And in some cultures, it's expected. Right? I attended a wedding in where was it? I think it was in Lusignan or one of those areas, where the
I live in Lusignan right now.
It's
coincidentally.
Good to know.
The religious leader was giving instructions to the bride, and but these are the kinds of things that we don't take seriously enough, right? But it's part of the cultural context. The instructions to the bride where you are marrying into a family. You are not marrying this man. You are marrying the bride. You are his slave, and you are the slave to the family. These are the instructions given to the woman. You are the, and this is our culture, and this is how we live, right? And I'm saying there is a cultural context which we don't understand fully. Now, we in other contexts, you have a similar kind of instruction, but it's phrased a little differently. We used to have you will love, honor, and obey your husband. I think now the word obey is not really mentioned in the discussion.
They say submit.
They say, well, but it's but in other words, there is an acknowledgement that there's a subjugation implied, and this is no longer acceptable. But all of violence is part of a culture, and unless it's addressed from a cultural perspective, right, and get to the root causes in that, we still are going to be just putting plasters basically on sores. And we'll talk more about the roots, the historical perspective. But let me give others a chance to talk.
No, I mean, I don't disagree with you with the role of religion and culture, but, well, two things. I would say it's a Guyanese culture is a culture of violence. So I would not break it down by ethnic group. So I would say it's Guyanese culture, Caribbean culture. So because I think that's one thing that, as divided as we may be, I think that's one in suffering and in experiencing violence, that is, tragically one thing that unites us. We, and there, I'm not sure what the exact, if the research has been broken down on by ethnicity. But I spoke with Karen D'Souza earlier today, who has done this work in Red Thread, and that she says, as far as she knows, there's no significant difference in the experience of violence based on your ethnicity. So that's one thing. So again, I think we need to look at more systemically. And I want to say also here that boy children are also victims of violence, right? Patriarchy and toxic masculinity affects them as well. And as they are, men are the main perpetrators of violence currently in our society. So what we need to look at what is causing that, right? So when a boy child is told to not cry, right, and not show his feelings and not value that part of himself, how is he then going to recognize and value that in a woman, right? And be able to share and connect with her in that way. So I think we need to recognize the violence that we do to our children, how we socialize them to be tough and to be, in control and not cry, not be emotional. Those are very, very damaging things that contribute to unhealthy relationships and a lot of the violence against women later on in life. So just want to mention those two things.
I think also violence is rewarded in the context of the military. Men who go out, soldiers who go and conquer the enemy, kill, they come back, they get stars. They are rewarded for their conquest. So it's a language that nations use to control, and predominantly in the armed forces are men. It is men who head the armies. It is men. Few women are now coming into the fora of leading, but they're few. Very, very few. So when we look at the violence and how it is played out, our soldiers are rewarded for that use of violence. They're not condemned because they're expected to actually be violent. Having myself been to court, my ex being a soldier, the magistrate told me point blank, what do you expect? He is to be violent if he is to protect our country. So she was applauding that and actually chastising me to say, why are you, my lawyer, saying, look, did this man have particular training that he can kill at will. And she's saying he's supposed to be like that if he is to protect our nation. So there's an acceptance that our men must be violent, and it is in that violence that they do the protection of the society and to defend, because we use violence to control. Nations do that all the time, whether it's the US invading Cuba, or invading Grenada, or invading other territories. We use violence as a language to control. And so in this society, there is some kind of acceptance. And right here in Guyana, there's acceptance that for women, they must be hit and beaten because they've done something wrong.
Yeah, but I think that then this is now, once we get into that realm, it is not about ethnicity. It's not. It's about the whole context of the world changing to patriarchy from matriarchy, right? And there are milestones in history that you can actually go back to and say this is when decisions were made to make patriarchy the governing principle, right? And let us do away with matriarchy. There are specific times that you can go back to, which again, these are things that oftentimes people shy away from. Because let me give you one example. There used to be the concept of mother, father, and child as the family unit and as the foundation of life. That changed at a specific point in time to Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. Understand that, right? It went from mother, father, and child to Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, which means the female, the deliberate decision, and these are recorded and researched. This is not me just saying this off the top of my head. There was a lot of research has shown that at that point in time, the woman was written out of the authoritative figures, out of the positions of respect. At that point in time, she became a secondary figure. And then the male, because father, son are males,
Yes.
Holy Ghost is nothing, right, in terms of a gender, right? So the woman was written out of history, and this is deliberate. This is not accidental. And again, a lot of research has been done on this to show that that was the time. Going from mother, father, and child to Father, to Son, and Holy Ghost. Remove the woman. And at that point in time, it became easy because it was now God's will. It was now God's will to defend, right? The woman became now a protectorate. She had to be protected, right? Everything that was feminine became dirty because the whole religious context became the governing, and I'm talking about religious meaning the Abrahamic religions, right? And again, a very good document was prepared by I think a Dr. Coxon, Historical Perspectives of Violence on Women. Historical Perspectives of Violence on Women. And this is part of what I'm talking about, right? That she went back and she said, these were the times. This is the time when decisions were made. So this is not, violence against women is not an accidental thing that we're now happening, is now occurring. This is something that has been decided upon at a specific time by men, right, and perpetrated for a couple of thousand years. And what is changing is when, in the last century, right, when women decided that we're not accepting this anymore, and that has caused. This is very recent, like I said. This is not, and so this is not something that is, this reaction is not something that is old. We are now beginning to react against this, but its roots are very well defined, And they're defined this again. They're defined in terms of the Abrahamic religions, where everything is male dominated, and women seen and not heard. You know, everything. And so girls were raised one way, and boys were raised another way. This is coming back to the culture now. So this is defined, and this again is not me saying this. You could. One of the good articles to look at again is a book called, or an article called "Historical Perspectives of Violence in Women," and it talks specifically about the timeline when this was initiated. So this is not accidental, and this is still being orchestrated. Okay.
Okay, let's talk about some of the reactions that women in our society have to violence perpetrated against them.
The reactions can stem from rage to acceptance and blame. Take, for instance, the two most recent deaths, one on the 30th of March and one on the 31st. You've heard so many women come out to say in the first one, which happened on Good Friday night, why did she go back? What is she doing over there? She looked for that, and that's it. In the other instance, she knew the man was like this. Why did she stay? As a matter of fact, someone wanted to do an interview with me looking at why did she stay. I'm like, no. So I was very happy when I saw Vidiratis Kisun's letter saying that no woman have any explanation for entrapment, and we should be asking questions within the army about X, Y, and Z, right? So the reactions in the society is like, look, this has happened. Have you seen any specific rights group issuing a statement in recent, it's like if we're just going along with the flow, and until the next one happens, and so there is this acceptance by some sections, both men and women, that women are looking for it, and that they should be punished with violence for infractions, whether it's going with different guys or having a phone call, blow, or the perception of blow. It is right. The man is right, because in my interview I did with Safe TV Channel News, I couldn't believe the man was asking me if I but these things that she did and these things. I said, but you're justifying it. He said, but these things that I said, what things are you talking about? So here it is, you're trying to justify a woman being shot in the streets 14 times.
I think there's a lot of blame with women, and we've seen it recently, especially on social media, where everybody has a voice and everybody has something to say. But being a victim of domestic violence myself, I think one of the reasons I have not gone totally public, I mean, some people know, is because of the blame that I will get. And the backlash and I don't want to be made a victim a second time or a third time or fourth time. So it not only comes from the men, it's from the women as well.
Yes.
And the families as well.
Oh, yes.
Some of our families would say, why do you talk back to him? He's violent, and he would hit you. So you should just be cool. And I think society has changed, and it's interesting what the doctor said about the historical aspect of it being the mother, the child, and the father, and then from that the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. I think a lot of our boys these days are being raised by single parent women, their moms. And sometimes we hear of these cases and we think to ourselves, how can he be so cruel when he was raised by a woman and he has sisters? But then where is the positive male influence? I think it is, the problem is with the men, and I think the solution is with the men as well.
Yes.
There's hardly anything a woman can do to change a man. He has to want to change. He has to want to follow an example. This is a good man. This is a man I look up to. This is an example that I like, and I will follow this. So it all has to do with the men. So as women, as single parent women, we have to take in, and know we have to do it with our girls, but we have to do it with our boys as well, because that's the next generation of men. Will they be violent towards their partners? Who do I blame for that? Do I blame myself? If my son is violent, do I blame myself for that? Not always. maybe never. But sometimes you have to take a look at yourself. How did I raise this boy? You know,
And that
how
was
did I
so-
carry myself as a woman? Because he tends to be angry at women for something.
Oh,
What did
yes.
he see me do while I was raising him? You know, or would he not trust women because I was not a woman to be trusted while I was raising him? Did I cheat on his dad and did he see it?
Yeah.
Did I, you know, and these are questions that we have to ask ourselves.
I think the greatest thing we can teach our boys, and this is what I've taught my boy, is not to accept it, is to leave that relationship. Because by staying, as Sherlina said, women try to stay to foster this sense of stability. But what you're doing in essence is raising a perpetrator. And one of the things that was my decision for leaving is that I didn't want my son to hit somebody else's daughter. I was conscious that I was a leader and that whatever I did was going to influence his life. So leaving a violent relationship is the best thing you can do in helping your child, especially the boy child, to not become a perpetrator.
If
Uh,
oh.
I'm sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
Well, what I would say also is, you know, we are not living on islands or in little bubbles, right? So again, going back to the system and society that we're living in. So where are the role models from the top down, right? Looking at our leaders from the top down. Where are the systems in place supporting these single mothers or single parents, right? Are they able to work and earn and be there for their children at the same time? A lot of times in Guyana, that's not possible. You have to work and leave your children for them to raise themselves, somebody else to raise them, take advantage of them, right? So it's not just
Right.
the individual mother's or father's responsibility, is our job as a whole. Not because you don't have children means that you don't care or you don't have something to do or a role to play, right? So from the top down, you know, we need positive role models and we need systems in place that support healthy families.
I think a three-part approach to this may be the culture. The culture as a whole, and this is not ethnicity based,
Yeah.
this is the culture as a whole. And not only Guyanese culture, but the world needs to recognize the transitions that we've been going through and the impact that it has had on women. Patriarchy is a violent, militant lifestyle,
Oh, yes.
right? And it is set up to be that. It is set up to control, to dominate. It is set up to brutalize. It is set up to be cruel, right? However, when you bring that into the family, there is no place. There is no place for that violence and militance, but you cannot separate the people from the acts. And then when they come to the family, you expect them to be gentle fathers. It doesn't work. So we need to recognize that patriarchy has been a disaster for the humankind, and which means we need to go back to fundamentally the mother, father, child concept, and not the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Right? Fundamentally,
Yes.
the woman has to be raised on the same level as the father and the child, so that there is respect from the top. This is from the top. This is from the very top down. Because the religion oftentimes is the basis for laws.
Oh, yes.
Okay, now, the other thing is family units need to be revived. Again, with the same concept. Mother, father, and child. This idea of wait until your father come home and he'll tear your skin. Right? That is not a good model.
No.
Right?
No.
Right, where the father is seen as the brutalizer.
Right.
But this is what we have been taught. Again, this is not accidental. This has been deliberate, right? And then the other thing is the individual. Michael Jackson says the man in the mirror, right? Individuals have to take responsibility,
Yes.
right? Whether it's a woman or a man,
Yes.
they have to take personal responsibility. Prevention is better than cure. If you know that this is an evil man, do not go with him. Likewise, if you know this is an unfaithful woman or she got men all over the place and you think you want somebody who is precious and not like that, don't go with that woman and then be mad with that woman. There is a responsibility that individuals must take. So change the person you see in the mirror, man or woman. Who you look at, that's what you have to change first in order to contribute to the changes in the system. 3-point approach. Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking it's interesting that you said that if you know this man is violent, don't go with him. But sometimes you don't know,
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
which is
He
is
shows
why,
you a different side.
Yeah,
Yeah,
which
yeah,
is why I always suggest to whoever I talk to that there be some sort of a registry, like a sexual predator registry.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Where if it was reported to the police or there's a record of it somewhere, that you could do background checks on your partner.
Yes.
You know, you want to marry somebody, you want to get into a relationship with them, because they might have been violent in the past to their
Yes.
partners. And I would use myself as an example. My partner was violent in the past. I did not know. His friends did not tell me. Nobody I knew told me anything until it started happening to me. And then everybody came and said, oh, you know, he did this to the previous person. And I am sure that the person he goes with, because it's a pattern, it's a
Yeah.
psychological,
Mhm.
he needs help. But how do you, the partner might say, you know, you're telling me this because you're jealous, and, you know, you don't want to be the one. But the partner, the future partner, must be able to access
Yes.
this
Yeah.
information
Agreed.
from law enforcement, from
Yeah.
somebody, so you know what you're getting into,
Yeah.
and it's up to you.
Yep,
Oh, yeah.
yep, up to 100%.
I concur.
While we're on the topic of solutions and solving the problem, are there services available to rehabilitate perpetrators of violence against women, as well as are there services to assist women who are victims of violence?
Go, Shirley.
I don't know of any proper rehabilitation programs. You know, we have the courts, which are very, very, very imperfect. So when and you know, the police. So when somebody is charged or there's a, you know, they might get locked up. But you know, what kind of rehabilitation happens in jail? Nothing.
Zilch.
Right.
And 3 years ago, in 2015, I can remember during a visit to the Honorable Minister of Public Security's office, I prefer the idea of having a batterer intervention program. I said, Mr. Minister, wouldn't it be good to have a batterer intervention program? This is in trying to tackle the scourge, because in 2013, there was actually a national conference for the prevention of interpersonal violence that came up with this document here that have over 50 odd recommendations. Our president, who's now president, Brigadier David Arthur Granger, he was opposition, he participated. They came up with lovely ideas here, and there was a national committee for the prevention of interpersonal violence. But it got shelved, of course, with a change of government, political will. So I was trying to resuscitate it and doing my advocacy to the minister and advocating that men be looked at, because we have to look at primary, secondary, and tertiary prevention programs. This is how we will begin to arrest the scourge. We just cannot hope that it will just wish away like that. And it was in 2012, Mr. Andrew Hicks and Andrew Hicks being a sociologist, I being a social worker, we came out in 2012 whereby we did an article asking the then government to raise violence against women as a public health threat, taking on the language of the former UN Secretary General, Ban Ki-moon, who called it a public health threat. You see, when you raise the scale and you call anything a public health threat, you must put the resources towards that and focus on it. So we need to have a plan that is focusing on, at least, I like the UK plan, it has 4 pillars: participation, prevention, protection, relief and recovery, in the strategic outcome number 3 that deals specifically with violence against women and gender-based violence. So we need to have a plan of action. We just can't sit and do nothing about it, because it continues to get harsher and harsher. From Monica Reese on to Riona Payne. It has been brutal.
Yeah,
I
but
think Sherlina was
No.
okay.
yeah, but I think we also, in addition to the UN resolutions and so forth, we need to understand the roots, and the roots are the places where people do not want to go, right? Because the roots are the foundation on which we currently stand, and it's all shaky, and we don't want to really go there. Okay. But if we look carefully, we find that the children don't raise themselves. The children are taught by somebody. They see somebody. They see a media. They see a
Yes.
culture.
Oh, yeah.
And if the children, if we expect something to happen, we have to change what the children are seeing, both in terms of our own interpersonal relationships and also the culture we live in. So it's not just, again, we say, a one man and hitting one woman. It has to do with the foundations. And until we raise the woman to the stature of the man, right, and get rid of this patriarchy, we will always have militancy, right? Military militancy that will destroy,
Oh, yes.
right? And we need to
I
get
agree,
back to
Doctor.
that. It existed before, right? You had civilizations where you had mother, father, and child, not Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. And we need to go back to that, because only unless the woman is elevated to that status and respected for that, all of this is good, but you're still not looking at the root cause, because we're going to raise our children from the bottom up.
Yeah.
And that's what they're based on.
And the root is patriarchy.
The root is patriarchy.
Oh,
We
yes.
need to get rid of that patriarchy. It is vicious and evil, and it's not part of the world that we want to live in today.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think we also need men to understand that they are hurt as well
Yeah.
by patriarchy
Yeah.
and by toxic masculinity. It's not just women who
Right.
suffer. Men have to, and you look at men die
The society.
younger than before women.
Yeah.
Look at the high rates of suicide. It's men
Men.
who are killing themselves more than women, right? So there's a lot of hurt, a lot of pain that's not being expressed by men, or they're expressing it by killing themselves or hurting
Saying earlier,
women and children,
Yes.
right? And other men as well. And so until men realize that they have something to gain by changing the way things are, it's not going to work,
Yeah.
right? So men need to be talking
Yeah.
to other men.
Yep.
And we also, in terms of plans and so on, having laws and things are good, but we have to start with how we educate the children,
yeah.
right? And so we have to be doing things in school from preschool on. We need to be talking about relationships and conflict resolution and communication, right? Sex ed, so it's not this thing that you don't know what to do, or you just go with the first person. You don't know. We need to talk about family planning, right?
Yeah.
Birth control,
Yeah.
teen pregnancy. The reason why a lot of women stay in violent situations because they have children and they need money to raise the children. Now, every child has a needs, and if you are not able and capable of taking care of the child, that puts you in a very vulnerable position.
Yes.
And power dynamics, all of that comes into play. So, yes, we need to do a lot on multiple levels.
Yeah.
And poverty, there are things the state can do in terms of living wages for people at the bottom. And there's also accountability from the top down, right? If our leaders are not holding each other accountable, right? What kind of example is that setting?
Okay, we're almost out of time,
Sure.
so I think it's best to end the program with the services that are available to assist women who are suffering from violence.
I know that Help Me Shelter do offer services. I know it's one of the NGOs that also provides a safe space if a woman wants to run and go. I use that service, that very service, being a survivor of gender-based violence. I know Red Thread offers some amount of support, but the state have a responsibility to prevent and protect women from violence on the basis of that very CEDAW convention, the Convention on the Elimination of All Discrimination Against Women, to which violence against women is the most prevalent. We will go to the UN, we have to report. They will ask us questions and they will tough us up. What are we doing as the state? The state can do more. Justice George have said it. More safe houses. Women want to leave, but where do they run? I was blessed. My family helped me. I'm here because my family opened their homes and I had a safe place to run. But for many women, they don't have that. And so we need safe spaces for women who are faced in this situation of violence. Safe spaces.
Yeah, we also need the law to change so that if the victim doesn't press charges, the magistrate could still go forward with the case. A neighbor or other family members can make statements that right now the victim has to be the one who presses a charge, and if she doesn't, the whole thing gets dropped. So that needs to happen. And we also need the police to do their work. A lot of times they don't investigate properly, and everything falls apart, right? And it takes too long, and the victims end up giving up. So we have systems in place, but they're not working properly, and we really need to push to make those things work. That's not prevention, but it's helpful.
We also need to recognize that this is not only a Guyanese problem, this is a global problem.
Yes, it is.
And this is why the roots have to be addressed. The problems have to be addressed from the root, because it is a global system that is put in place, that was put in place deliberately. All right, and this is what needs to be eradicated.
Yeah.
I concur.
Right?
I would like to say I concur with everything that they said, the laws, the policies, and so on regarding the police and everything. But it starts with the woman herself, who knows that she's in a position where she's being violated, and she needs to get out. She needs to realize her importance to her children, to her family, to society.
To herself.
And she needs to understand that. I think I'm going to leave by saying this. I think a lot of women die because they do not actually believe that this person will kill them. There's some amount of doubt. So they do not fight back in the same manner they would fight back a stranger who's attacking them on the side of the road, because of the feeling that is attached to this individual. But we need to stop that. We need to understand that our lives are in danger, and this person will kill you eventually. Maybe not willfully, by accident. They choke you a little bit too long, you end up dead. And there's no coming back from that. So get yourself out. If you're looking and you're going through any situation like that, think of how you can get out. It might be a step-by-step process. You will need help. Reach for the help, and eventually it will come. And hopefully you'll be safe, and we would not be reading about you in the paper. And then when you finally do read the news, or you look at the news, you say, oh, she was going through this a long time,
Okay. So we are essentially out of time, but it was definitely a good discussion, and I hope that perhaps somebody who is affected by violence would have been watching the program and would have gotten some amount of courage
To leave.
that relationship or the circumstance, because it's not always a relationship, So I just want to say thank you to all of you, my panelists, Natasha Smith, Sherlina Nageer, Dr. Norman Nq-a-qui, Miss Nicole Cole, for being on African Drums.
Happy to be here.
It's good.
Thank you.
Great. And also, before I leave the program, I have to tell you about my headpiece that I am wearing. It is from actually a female student at the University of Guyana. She has a budding small business, and I decided that this was the perfect opportunity for me to wear her products and to encourage you to support her business. It is called Chic, Natural, and Delicacy, where nature meets nurture, because she also provides some edible things. I'm not sure what they all are, but if you call her, you will be able to find out. Her name is Miss Carrington, and her number is 617-3105. Miss Carrington, 617-3105. Oh, I see here. She specializes in shea butter mix, African satin bonnets like this one here, and vegetable lasagna. So please support a young lady's budding small business. And thank you so much for being on African Drums, the television organ of the Coffee 250 Committee, an organization dedicated to the empowerment of the African Guyanese community through education and the encouragement of self-activity. Please like our Facebook page, Coffee 250. Check out our website, www.coffee250.com, and send us an email, coffee250gy@gmail.com. We would love to hear from you, and please donate to the cause. Thank you for being here. I'm Elsie Harry, and next up there should be African History Corner. See you next time.